thank you very much for the introduction and also for the ideas that you now propose. I think it's very interesting food for thought. I want to thank the organizers. It's been splendid coming to Athens and to see ancient Greece. And it's a very good topic you've chosen to take up. It's a difficult topic. We won't get to the bottom of it today, but it's very important to start a process on this very important topic of greening humanity, I think. So I really like that. I'm a lawyer, and you may know this old saying, but nevertheless, you know the story about the lawyer traveling. The lawyer's in the balloon, and then he gets lost, and he sees some people down at the earth, at the ground, and he says, oh, there are somebody, they can tell us where we are. And then they shout down to the persons down there and says, where are we? And they answer, in a balloon. Oh, they said, more lawyers. And how did they know? Because it was absolutely correct and absolutely useless. So I really hope that I'll be more of use to you today than this. And I've chosen to say something which is partly very overall perspectives, partly illustrative examples, and a few pictures, just to make sure that you don't fall asleep. It's Saturday morning, you might be tempted. So this picture I took because it's my home university. I always take that. But also to say that we hosted, as you know, the COP15 about climate change. And it was in many ways a very frustrating way of doing things. And we've had speakers talking to us about what went wrong. And one of the things that went wrong was that they were too ambitious. They made it too much of a competition. They took on too much to be leaders, not only hosts. And they put too much power in getting the agreement that they wanted. And I think it's important that we learn from that when we talk about global governance, because what we have to learn is that this is a long process. You cannot do it just having one agreement, one conference, whatsoever. You need to have a variety of things going on, and you need to collaborate more than compete, or also collaborate instead, which was not. We heard quite a lot about that yesterday, about collaboration on top of competition. So I think when I hear now that they are having, we just had the other day a speech of the Danish Minister for Energy and Climate, and she said now they're going to Cancun, and they are trying to say, Cancun can. Then I'm wondering a bit. I mean, aren't they again doing the same mistake, making competition out of it, making either you succeed or you fail, instead of accepting that you have to have a process, the Copenhagen Accord, how to deal with it. So I think that we should be very aware of getting the experiences we can from both successes and failures. I'll come back to that, but I think that it's, in a way, it's strange. I mean, many of you sitting here, you are from science, hard science, and there you always validate. You see how you make trial and error, you do lots of stuff. When you're making legislation as a lawyer, you don't find out whether it works or not in many ways. You just do it because the politicians want it to be done. And in that sense, we need some kind of finding out whether the purposes that it was meant for, that we will succeed in that. I've chosen some trends that I will take into account. And I come from bioethics and biolaw, but now I'm going into global governance. And what I'm presenting today would reflect that kind of transformation I'm doing these days. Well, not in the, very bodily sense, but in other ways, maybe also. Bioethics. There is a tendency of ethicization of technoscience. When I started about bioethics together with Ines and other people 10, 20 years ago, people in hard science would just say, oh, ethics, we don't need you. If you think it's not longer back than that, then you must say that many people today would accept ethics as part of everyday life, as part of the way of thinking. Many still ask, what's ethics all about? But I mean, it's part of our way of thinking these days, and it's not that long ago. Biolaw, a boundary drawing move. We've seen in many, many countries that we have legislation on assisted reproduction, genetic testing, and now we see about cloning and what have you. So the way of having national legislation is also part of everyday life now. And that's not so long ago either. I mean, Louise Brown, assisted reproduction, it was 78, if I remember correctly. And it's since then that all this has grown, both bioethics and biolaw. Globalization, power shift. From the COP15, we saw that when Obama wanted to talk to the Chinese, they called from the airport, it's too late. Power shift. The Chinese, other parts of Asia, are taking a role which is much, much stronger than we're used to. When I was a vice chancellor, I had a meeting with one of the vice ministers for education in China. And it was very, very interesting in the sense that both when they decide something, they just get it done. You know that from coming to Shanghai, if you've been there half a year ago, there are at least 20 new high-rises. They do it very fast, very effective. Singapore, we talked about that, it's about the same. They decide and they just do it. Being in our more slow democracy's way of doing things, we don't do it to the same rate. But another difference, which I think we should be very alert about, is that ethics is more a part of everyday life with us, I think, and that the way of thinking about being creative, that's when you talk to them, he stayed with me much longer than he was supposed to. And it was because they are very keen on finding out what we are doing by being creative. And they have some kind of, they're very, very, very clever, but very often in a very, not narrow, I don't mean narrow-minded, please understand me correctly, but in a way of doing specific things, not having the broader picture, not having the societal impact, etc. I think Singapore is the same, and they came to Copenhagen to see how our schools were working because they wanted to take up that creativity and how we're doing that. So I think that kind of clash we shall have to take up when we're talking about bioethics, biolaw, biogovernance in different parts. And we should be very keen on making collaboration with the Chinese, with other people from other kinds of the world, Africa, which is also of great importance, so that we don't only see it as our way of doing, and then we shall have to export that model. Governance, well, we've seen the financial crisis, and that gives rise to more acceptance of global governance as a topic you need to take into account. I mean, it'll be a long way and it'll be very difficult, but it's on the agenda in another way than it used to be. And CSR, corporate social responsibility, the way companies take in the responsibility of the world, is also a new tendency that you see in many big businesses. In Denmark, we just passed legislation which will be obliging the big firms to make a report once a year about what they're doing in the area of SCR. They're not obliged to do anything specific, but they are going to report what they are doing. And it has, in fact, they just did that now. And it has quite a tremendous effect because they call and say, what can we do here because we want to have a report that shows that we're doing something. And of course you need to be alert that it's not only glittered paper. But it's a way of making a process go so that you get things done to a certain extent. And it'll take time, but it'll expand, and others would like to do the same. Climate change matters, we know that. And one of the things I'm wondering about, and also come back to that, that's in a way, I think that when you have a climate panel, if I understand it correctly, it's mostly natural scientists who are in there. You're thinking about what is the sense of climate change, what's it doing, how can we use technology to improve it, etc. But you're not taking in social sciences. You're not taking in how can you change behavior, how can you think of governance, how can you do other things. Somehow we're narrow-minded ourselves in our way of dealing with it, because we only take some parts of it. I know the Danish EU Commissioner for Climate Change, Connie Hedegaard, is a very bright woman. We made a coffee club once. It's very popular in Denmark for females to make coffee clubs. I don't know why. We're not knitting. We're talking quite a lot. But But she said, well, who can do it? And then I got silent because it was in November and the climate COP15 was in December. But I mean, somehow we need to take into account that we often talk about interdisciplinarity, but somehow in this sense we don't use it, which is quite strange in many ways. And then university commercialization, we talked about that. How can we make sure that the way we're thinking in university administration and leadership today is not only taking the commercial part? I think it's fine to have the commercial parts where it fits in. I'm absolutely for that. I'm positive about that. But we should also have the other roles, the roles that John Sulston talked about on Thursday. How can we engage universities to go into these kinds of areas? I'll also come back to that. So which are the global governance challenges? Here's a thinker. See that? I think that I'll take on 4 things here. One is to go from local to global bioethics. In the EU Commission about bioethics that Ines and we are part of, we have been quite eager to take in the global parts, both to have meetings with ethics commissions from other parts of the world and to take the global aspects as such as part of what we're doing. From bioethics to biolaw, it's part of the process to start on ethics and then go on to governance, regulation, what have you. And from bioethics to ethics in businesses, finances, etc., you cannot only deal with bioethics these days, because it's so important also to have ethics in the other areas if you want to move things. For instance, when we're talking about climate change and other kind of challenges we're facing. And I think if I understand it correctly, then I think that President Barroso from the EU, he is quite keen on having the ethics in finances as part of what we're dealing with in the EU. And I think that's a very good trend to have to do something of that. And the 4th one is from protecting values to securing resources, education, research, both knowledge and economy. Because somehow when we are having all our conventions, etc., about bioethics, it's more or less you're having on the no hat. You're saying we don't want this, we don't want that, be cautious. And we, in that sense, some people think we're negative. We don't, of course. We think we're very positive. But in a way, I think it's important that we don't only engage in saying no to things, in the eager to protect values, etc., but also to making sure how can we participate in securing resources, at least by way of research and education, but also by way of finances, so that we get further on in that respect. If we now start with the bioethics, we have the European values. They are quite outspoken in different matters. People may disagree about this, but I think I took it from the what's called the basic things about EU, so it should be okay. Dignity, freedoms, autonomy, justice, solidarity, citizens' rights, democratic process, good governance. And the question is here, is this also reflecting global bioethics so that we can have built upon a global bioethics to make global governance, or how is that? And just to show you a few pictures as examples, synthetic biology in the EU and US media, you can see that the news stories regarding synthetic biology that mention potential benefits, potential risks, or both, there you can see that in the US, they see much more benefits, whereas EU is much more cautious, is much more reluctant. I think you like that, or don't like it, I don't know. And the same goes for synthetic biology in the US media when we're talking about different EU-US risk perceptions, where the US tend to be very keen on biosecurity, whereas the EU both finds biosecurity, biosafety, and ethics equally important.